Time being 5 o'clock, we'll call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Directors at the Vallecitos Water District for Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022 at 5 p.m. And this meeting's via teleconference. I'm going to read a portion of the notice to the public. Members of the public attending the meeting via the Zoom video conferencing platform can express their desire to offer public comment or provide input on an agenda item at the appropriate time by utilizing the raise hand function. Persons who have dialed into the meeting would like to make a comment can enter *9 on their phone and will be identified by their phone number when it is their turn to speak. Additional instructions for online participation are posted on the district's website, www.vwd.org/meetings. Next, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. And could I ask General Manager Perlin to lead us in the pledge?
You may. I'd be happy to do so. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, liberty,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next is roll call attendance. Director Sinella.
Here.
Director Hernandez.
Here.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Here.
Director Penick.
Here.
And I'm here as well. Okay, next is additions to the agenda. I don't have any proposed additions, so we'll move on to adopting tonight's agenda. I'm looking for a motion in a second.
Move to adopt.
Second, Penny.
Okay, it's been moved to adopt the agenda by Director Sinella, seconded by Director Penick. Let's vote. Director Sinella.
Yes.
Director Hernandez.
Yes.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Yes.
Director Penick.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Unanimously adopted. Next is public comment. Persons wishing to address a matter not on the agenda may be heard at this time by utilizing the raise hand feature of the Zoom video conferencing platform. Public comment should start by stating name, address, and topic. No action or discussion may be undertaken on any item not appearing on the agenda, except that the board or staff may briefly respond to the statements made or questions posed during public comment. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Public comment on items appearing on the agenda should be raised at the time the item is discussed. Do we have any public comment?
We did not receive any emailed public comments before, and I do not see any members of the public raising their hands electronically at this time.
Yeah. We'll move on to the consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar will be voted upon by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or member of the public requests that a particular item or items be removed from the consent calendar, in which case will be considered separately under action items.
Move to approve tonight's consent calendar.
Second, Hernandez.
It's been moved by Director Sinella, seconded by Director Hernandez to approve the consent calendar. Let's vote. Director Penick.
Yes.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Yes.
Director Hernandez.
Yes.
Director Sinella.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. It's approved unanimously. That brings us to action items. Action item 2.1, discussion regarding in-person public meetings. And I'll hand it over to the general manager. I think you're muted.
I was, sorry about that. Thank you, President Althorpe. So COVID has certainly changed the way public meetings are conducted. A series of executive orders from the governor allowed meetings to be conducted virtually because of the COVID experience. And as the COVID situation has progressed, the executive orders have mostly been rescinded and replaced by other pieces of legislation. The most recent is Assembly Bill 361. So AB 361 still allows for virtual meetings, but in order to do so, the board needs to make certain findings. And back on October 20th of 2021, our board did not take the action to continue with virtual meetings and this caused the district to briefly resume in-person meetings. At our meeting on January 12th of 2022, the board elected to return meetings to a virtual format due to a surge in COVID cases. AB 361 requires that the board take action every 30 days in order to continue with virtual meetings. Back on February 2nd of 2022, the board did make the findings necessary to continue to conduct its meetings virtually. If the board wants to continue meeting virtually forward, a finding would need to be made at tonight's meeting that a state of emergency exists, continues to exist, that poses a threat to human health. If the board did that, we would continue our board and committee meetings remotely. And if we did so, we'd have to come back every 30 days after that, as prescribed by AB 361. If the board would like to do that, if they'd like to continue to meet virtually, I could place an item on the March 16th agenda if the board wanted to continue to deliberate on this matter. So alternatively, if the board does not make the appropriate findings today, then we would be required to revert to in-person public meetings starting, I believe, no later than this Friday, March 4th, which is 20 days after the board's last, or 30 days after the board's last action. So it's an ever-changing regulatory field out there. CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has developed a new system for assessing the COVID risk of particular areas, and it's broken down by county, and they have 3 levels, which are high, medium, and low. They consider things like hospital bed occupancy, hospital admissions, total number of COVID cases, criteria like that. And based on these criteria, San Diego County is listed in the high risk category. So our case rate is still above the threshold in both for the state and the county, although it has been dropping significantly in recent weeks. So based on that high risk determination, groups like CDC and CDPH, the California Department of Public Health, both recommend that everyone wear masks in high transmission areas indoors. And since we are a high transmission area, that would apply. But keep in mind, it's a recommendation, not a requirement. So tonight, that's just a little background. Staff is looking for board direction whether we want to return to in-person board meetings. And when we do, if we do it tonight or subsequently, staff will provide the most up-to-date information regarding safety protocols appropriate for in-person meetings. And since things change so quickly, I would probably do that just in the days preceding the meeting. Be happy to answer any questions and provide any additional background if you'd like. Back to you, President Eltharp.
Okay, thank you. I guess at this time, questions or comments from our board members. Director Hernandez.
I thought the mask mandate was lifted or going to be lifted in the next day or two.
Yeah, so I believe the mandate is lifted, but it's down to a recommendation. So I don't believe we're required to wear it in public. It's strongly recommended based on the case rate that still exists. But I believe we could conduct the meetings without masks for both the public and the board members. Staff is a little bit different. We still haven't changed our guidelines internally. We still are restricted to zones. Unvaccinated staff members have to wear masks. So the rules for the staff may be a little bit different than for the board and the public, but it wouldn't prohibit them necessarily from going into the boardroom, although we do have exclusion zones. So the staff discussion is a little bit different than what I'm asking the board tonight.
Okay, Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you, President Eltharp. I have 2 questions. Number 1, do we have any upcoming meetings where we are expecting a higher rate than usual of public attendance? I think there's room for nuance in this discussion, so I'd like to know that piece of information. Secondly, how are we doing with the percentage of folks at Vallecitos that are vaccinated? Because I know we got that information last time. We passed an incentive. So I wonder if we have any updated information. I was surprised at the low percentage rate the last meeting. So I wonder if we have an update on that, because I think that's important information for us to know too.
Yeah, so I don't have updated information. Rhonda's on the line with us. So I'd ask Rhonda if she has more current information to go ahead and provide that. And then I'll answer your first question when Rhonda's done. So Rhonda, do you have any updated vaccination numbers?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't. I haven't heard anything basically they're not knocking down my door yet, but Bridget was out of the office for a little bit, so I'll ask her for updated numbers.
Can you reiterate what it was last time? I can't remember if it was 29 people or 29%. So
Ooh. I think it was only, oh gosh, Glenn, do you remember? I think it was a very small number that had everything, including their booster.
I think it was around 25 people that had everything fully boosted. Now, having said that, that's the people that have demonstrated to us that they're fully boosted. There may be employees that are fully vaccinated and boosted that just haven't shared that information with HR. So part of what we were hoping with the incentives is that those people that are fully vaccinated will come in and demonstrate that, prove to us, and it would encourage people that haven't gotten the vaccines and the boosters to do so, and then demonstrate to us that they've done so. Our feeling is that the numbers are higher than we have records of, but it's hard to answer specifically exactly what the number is. The people that have been approaching HR, from my knowledge, are people that have already been boosted, vaccinated and boosted, and they just want to make sure that they have access to the incentive money. I don't know the number of people that have been truly incentivized to get it. So Randy, I see your hand up if you wanted to add to that.
And it's not much. I just found the numbers from the last meeting. It was 22 employees have provided everything, which is 25% of our staff. And there's an additional 8% that are fully vaccinated, but not yet eligible for their booster. So I don't have additional numbers to say if anyone outside that group has come forward yet.
And Director Boyd Hodgson, well, I see Director Sinella has his hand up. I don't know if it's on that item or if you want me to answer Director Boyd Hodgson's first question next.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Okay, so Director Boyd Hodgson, I think your first question was, are there any upcoming meetings that we think will have a higher than normal attendance? The only one I'm aware of is the workshop that we wanted to schedule that had to do with some of the developer funding issues that have been raised before and the reserve levels. When the board talked about that before, what they said is they wanted to have that meeting in person. So we haven't scheduled anything yet because we're not back to in-person meetings. When the board makes the decision to go back to in-person meetings, we will then try to coordinate with the board to set up a date for that workshop. But I would guess that it would probably be within a meeting or two of when we go back, or within, I'd say, a couple weeks of when we go back to in-person board meetings. So staff's pretty ready for that meeting, but would still need some finishing touches when a formal date is set.
Okay, Director Snow.
Yeah, thank you, President Elthar. I just wanted to just voice my thoughts on this for the board. I think we all want to get back to in-person meetings as soon as possible. I mean, we tried it already a few weeks ago, and unfortunately, we because of Omicron, we had to go back to virtual. I'm definitely supportive tonight. I'm actually supportive either way, either going back to in-person or keeping it virtual for another month. And the reason why I'm open-minded for doing it for another month and reevaluating the current situation at that time based off of the current data at that time is because I'm the only preference I really have is I want to avoid going back and forth, virtual, live. And so I think we can best accomplish that while safeguarding our critical employees by holding off voting going back tonight and reevaluating it next month, but just one board member's opinion. If the data is the same or better in a month from now, I will definitely be advocating that we go back to in-person meetings.
Thank you. Director Hernandez. I think you're muted.
Oh, Jim, you're muted.
Glenn, what's the statistics relative to our employees and what, increased in cases, decreased, the same,
So we're still we're still struggling. We're still having people getting either positive test cases or being symptomatic and being asked to be, being sent home and waiting for test results. We are out of all of our outbreaks. So I think I mentioned that we had outbreaks in 3 of our work zones. So those are, I believe those have all run their course. So from that perspective, things are better. But by no means are we out of the woods where we're not having any incidents of people having either being symptomatic or all the way up to being testing positive. Fortunately, we haven't seen a lot of employees going to the hospital or getting really sick. But a positive test is a positive test, regardless of the level of their symptoms. So things are getting better, but they're not where I'd like them to be quite yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to offer my opinion. I'm kind of in the same boat with Director Snell. I'm fine either way, but I think the biggest impact, it looks to me like, is on staff. So I'd like to hear from the general manager on what he would like to do in the next month or 2.
Yeah, my recommendation would be that we try to do this for another month. I'd like to get some distance behind us. In the early days of COVID, you may recall that the governor had the 4 colored tiers. And one of the things I liked about that is they said to move from one tier to a less restrictive tier, you had to go numerous weeks at that lower level before they would let you go to the lower level, right? They didn't want, because they didn't want to do exactly what Director Sinella said. They didn't want to be bouncing back and forth. And I think we're right on the edge here. We probably could go back to virtual, but it wouldn't take much to kick us back. I mean, go back to in person, but it wouldn't take much to kick us back into virtual. And I don't think that helps the public either. So my recommendation would be to go another month. Unfortunately, because of the 30-day timing, we would have to reconsider this on March 16th, because the first meeting in April is April 6th, which is more than 30 days from tonight. So we'd have to, if the board wanted to continue to go virtual, they'd have to make some findings today. And then I'd be bringing this back in front of the board on March 16th, if they wanted to go extend through the end of March. So, but my recommendation is let's do this a minimum of 2 more weeks, and then we can regroup on the 16th and see where we are.
Yeah, I think it'd be easiest just to include the AB 31 or 361 item at each meeting that we can consider.
Yep.
Okay, any other discussion, questions, motions?
Move staff's recommendation.
A second.
So I'm going to look to Mr.
Okay.
Before there's a vote, I'm going to look to Mr. Gilpin. Does the board need to voice any particular findings to allow these meetings to be continued virtually?
Well, they do, Glenn. I think they were included in your staff report regarding that local officials are still recognizing social distancing, which is no longer criteria. But I think the important thing is you see it as a threat to your staff and the public, and that at this point it's, the social distancing and the virtual is allowing more people an opportunity to participate who may not be comfortable coming to the in-person meetings.
Okay, so are you comfortable that the motion as made and seconded is sufficient?
Yes, on your staff recommendation, I believe it is.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, let's vote. Director Pennick,
Yes.
Director Boyd Hodgson,
Yes.
Director Hernandez,
No.
Director Sinella,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So the measure passes 4-1. Thank you. Okay, moving on to action item 2.2, fiscal year 21-22 tactical plan initiatives.
All right, I'll take that item, President Ellithorpe. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So the board approved the 2022 strategic plan on December 15th of last year. And that plan provides the high-level strategic direction for Vallecitos over the next 5 years. The plan was broken into 6 main areas called strategic focus areas. And those 6 areas include infrastructure integrity, organizational improvement and efficiency, workforce excellence, fiscal responsibility, public information and outreach, and environmental stewardship. And each of those SFAs or strategic focus areas was broken down further into areas called supporting strategies. So shown here is a copy of the table of contents from the strategic plan, and it shows the organization of the SFAs along with the supporting strategies. So this is just kind of how it's laid out in the strategic plan. So although these topic areas provide a good guide for what we want to accomplish, they don't detail how those things will get done. And that's the purpose of a tactical plan. So a tactical plan outlines the steps required to fulfill your strategic plan. So it breaks down these really lofty ideals and objectives into specific measurable action steps that will lead the organization in the direction identified in the strategic plan. So the specific tasks identified in a tactical plan, and we're calling those tactical plan initiatives, need to be SMART. And that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So staff will be assembling a tactical plan for each fiscal year in the life cycle of the strategic plan. And we recommend coordinating the tactical planning efforts with our fiscal year cycle, which runs from July 1 through June 30th. And that'll help facilitate budgeting and resource allocations. So the plan being presented to the board tonight is called Tactical Plan 2022. And that only covers the remaining 4 months of fiscal year 21-22. So it'll cover March through the end of June. And I'm calling this kind of a transition plan, and this will allow, it'll cover the rest of this fiscal year, and then it'll allow subsequent tactical plans to align with the fiscal years. So the plan that was included in the board packet includes 37 initiatives, and it touches on each of the 6 strategic focus areas in almost all of the supporting strategies. And I'll say 37 initiatives is a lot for the last 4 months of the year. I was surprised that we went through an internal process with the managers and other staff members to come up with these ideas, and we whittled it down, and we still have 37. We're confident that we can get these done, and we're confident that it'll move things forward. So at the end of this fiscal year, staff will bring a report to the board to demonstrate the level of performance on the tactical plan. Going forward, we'll probably provide, when we get into the first full year tactical plan, we'll probably do it on a quarterly basis. We'll be providing updates so the board is aware of what's going on. Near the end of this fiscal year, not only will we be bringing a report on how we did in the Tactical Plan 2022, we'll be bringing forward to the board Tactical Plan 2023, which will lay out the initiatives that staff will be focusing on for next fiscal year, starting July 1. So it is not my intent tonight to run through each of the tactical plan initiatives. They were included in the board packet. I do have a slide that shows all of the tactical plan elements if the board wanted to see them. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have, but you can imagine it would take quite some time to go through 37 tactical plan elements or initiatives. So the recommendation in the report tonight is that the board approve staff's recommendation and adopt the Tactical Plan 2022. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you. I think that this is a really wise move, General Manager Program, to have it be transitional. I mean, one of the reasons why we originally had a strategic plan was because the last one had been done in 2012 and a lot had been updated. So having a tactical plan and a strategic plan that covers more than 1 year, I think it's really smart. And I think we want to do these things in a way that is lasting and in a way that makes an impact. And I love it that we are working through SMART goals, the acronym SMART. I think that was raised during our strategic planning session. And I think it's very smart. I think you did a really great job with this, and staff too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Director Sonola. I think you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I have similar comments as to Director Boyd Hodgson, but in addition to what she's already said, I just want to say that that staff has really stepped it up with this tactical plan and organized the district's goals and initiatives that we need to accomplish in a very professional way, in a professional manner that I haven't seen since I've been on the board. And this is the kind of organization, government utility that I want to be part of as a board member, because we are organizing ourselves in such a professional manner and documenting what we're trying to achieve, setting goals, and then measuring our results at the end of the day. And so we can, in a way that's all in doing that all in a manner that's transparent for the public. And so kudos for everybody that's been involved, from the board's strategic planning session to management and everybody else on the Vallecitos team who helped participate in this process.
Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I'd like to commend staff as well on a very ambitious, but I think achievable set of goals. So yeah, I commend staff and the board as well. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve, Hernandez.
Second, Sanella.
It's been moved by Director Hernandez, seconded by Director Snella to adopt the Tactical Plan 2022. Let's vote. Director Snella,
Yes.
Director Hernandez,
Yes.
Director Boyd Hodgson,
Yes.
Director Pennick,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well, so it's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 2.3, recommendations from the Public Awareness Personnel Policy Committee regarding ordinance number 216.
Yeah, I'll kick this off, President Elitharp, then I hand it over to Chris Robbins. So the board may recall that there have been many discussions about updating some of our ordinances, policies, and resolutions and the like. And a lot of that responsibility was kind of delegated to the policy committee. So we have met with the policy committee on several occasions, and one of the ones that we're focusing on, one of the documents that we're focusing on is Ordinance 216, which we call Business of the Board. So I'm going to let Chris kind of walk you through the process that recently took place at the policy committee, and I'll be happy to pipe in and answer any questions. So Chris, you want to jump in?
Thank you, General Manager Prim. So the P3 committee met last month and basically went through the Ordinance 216 very thoroughly, kind of almost line by line. The ordinance itself is establishing the general provisions for conducting the business of the board. The meeting was on February 7th, and it included a complete review. A lot of the sections that were reviewed were just kind of left as is. And then certain recommendations were brought forward. And then there was other ones that I'll get to a little later on that are going to require further discussion by the board members. So starting off, section 1.9B, basically the board reorganization section. The recommendation was to go ahead and keep the existing language, but to add that the president of the board would in turn appoint the vice president. That was the first recommendation from the P3 committee. Director Elitharp, or President Elitharp, Director Snella has his hand up.
Sure, go ahead, Director Snell.
Thank you, President Elitharp. Chris, do you mind if I ask questions as we go, or would you prefer that I wait till the end?
I'm good with let's address them as we go through them. That's probably best.
I think that'd be better, yeah.
Okay, obviously I'm not on the policy and public awareness committee, so I don't have this information. So I'm curious with regards to this particular item. Was the intent for when we say that the president shall appoint the vice president, was the intention to do away with the kind of the rotation that we've traditionally had with regards to the vice president position, meaning that let's just fast forward 9 months, and the next president essentially kind of can pick from any of the four?
So I think the reality of the situation is that we have 5 divisions and we have 4-year cycles with the elections, and the two numbers don't go into each other well. And that is the main problem, is that we've had a practice where we typically do things a certain way, but it's in conflict with what the actual ordinance says.
No, I understand, but I understand that challenge. I'm not clear though. Does this mean that we're doing away with the tradition of including the position of vice president as part of that as part of the rotation that we have been doing? Was that the intent by the committee? Was that the spirit of what they were trying to accomplish with regards to this new language?
And Director Sinella, I would suggest that maybe the committee members are obviously in attendance tonight. It may be best to hear directly from them as to what the intent was, but I think what they recognized is that the practice of the rotation of both the president and the vice president leads to potential conflicts with the ordinance section. So they were trying to find a way that they didn't perpetuate a cycle or a rotation that may cause that conflict, but I'll let the committee members speak for themselves.
Yeah, I see Director Boyd Hodgson has her hand raised.
Thank you. General Manager Perum articulated it well. You know, what we are running up against is we have a policy in place or an ordinance in place that suggests, and it would be easy if we saw kind of a red line of what it was and what we're proposing. But the ordinance says that each new board member will have the opportunity to serve as president during their first term. So we have that, but we also have the historical practice of that the vice president typically succeeds the person for which he or she is serving as vice president. So that's going to come into conflict next year because neither Director Pennock nor myself are vice president this year. And it will be the last 2 years of the 4-year cycle. So keeping the language as is, and we had a robust discussion about this, but keeping the language as is just reiterates that the president will appoint the vice president and gives the president the flexibility to deviate or to stay with the historical precedents.
Thank you. The language in the proposed language does not address that that the president's appointment still must be approved by the majority of the board. Was that purposely left out, or was that inadvertently left out? Is this, I guess getting back to the intent and the conversations that the committee had, was the intent that you're asking the board to in the future give sole power to appoint the vice president and without board approval?
That's the way the language is. So the president would have the sole power to appoint the vice president, but the ordinance is probably lacking in what the process is to select the president in the first place. And that's why I think the board has historically gone with the rotation, which is now running into a conflict. So
yeah.
And one of the things, let me add this, Director Sinella. The intent right now is to have this kind of a more robust discussion, get feedback, and staff will be coming back to the board with an updated ordinance for your approval. So this isn't your last crack at it. right?
Oh, great. That makes me feel a lot better. Thank you.
Yeah, so
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we'll gather that feedback and then we'll come back with a red line like Director Boyd Hodgson recommends for the next, and I'm not saying the next board meeting, but when it comes back to the board. And then hopefully we'll incorporate any comments we get here.
Yeah, and I don't mean any, my questions are really sincerely just out of, I'm trying to inform myself the best I can. I certainly appreciate the committee's efforts, and this particular ordinance has been, while it has not really been a big issue in the past 1, 2, 3 years, in the past, it has caused some spirited debate, to say the least, and it needs to be addressed. So I definitely appreciate the committee taking that on. I do have a little bit of concerns about the language of just because when you read the whole ordinance, it talks about that the president serves at the pleasure of the board, but yet then the president, we potentially could be giving the president sole power to appoint the vice president. There's nothing in the ordinance that says that to be president, that you have to be the vice president the prior year. I just think that there's an opportunity to and while I understand that, from preparing for this meeting and reviewing the notes in the packet, it seems like we took a little bit of a fine brush to this ordinance, and I was kind of hoping that we would just almost blow the whole thing up and really craft something that's going to work for us. Certainly, we could look to see how similar ordinances that our neighboring boards may have in place, but I just think we have an opportunity, since the entire board has an appetite at this time to really look at this ordinance, that maybe there's an opportunity to kind of address all those different issues. And I'm in favor of I'm the one who made the motion to put the language in there about protecting the first term of all of the board members having an opportunity to serve as president, because I think it's important. So I'm not trying to get around that. I just think that we're still leaving some things that could be open to interpretation or misunderstanding, and I don't think we need to do that. I think if we really take our time and address this, I think we can really come up with a really good ordinance for ourselves.
Okay, thanks, Director Snow. Director Penning.
Yeah, no, just to address that, I mean, you bring up some good points, Mike. I don't know if it has to be all blown up, because it's worked well. And like you said, there's tradition, there's policy, and it seems like it has worked well, with exception of the vice president becoming the president. So, I mean, I don't know if it's called sole power. I think we just replace that with flexibility. It just gives the president flexibility to choose his vice president, without the next step being that vice president becoming the president. Because the wording in there, like you said, and you put it in yourself, is everybody has the chance to be the president during their first term, period. I don't know if we need to muddy it up or anything like that. That's why we were trying to simplify instead of, complicate. Everybody will have the chance to become a president during their first term, period. And the president has the flexibility to choose his vice president. The vice president has no bearing on becoming, next in term for the presidency. And I think a big part of that was, to be honest, the vice president doesn't have a whole lot to do. I mean, let's be honest, they really don't, with exception of stepping in when the president's not there to run a meeting. So that's why I think we didn't need to blow everything up and write a whole new section and do everything else. It's been working fine. It just, again, runs into a problem when that vice president, and it's not in the first term, has already served a term during their term. And that's why we just said, okay, let's just give the flexibility to the president to choose their vice president, because they're going to be working hand in hand together anyways. And then we'll just keep tradition and or policy going where everybody has a chance to be president, period. So I think that was our intent, if I'm not overspeaking Director Boyd Hodgson, but that's where we were going with that, I think.
Did you want to say something, General Manager, before I call on Director Hernandez?
Well, I was just going to say, I think the thing that's lacking in this whole thing is how do you pick a president in the first place? And absent that, I think that's why the practice really was leaned on heavily. Sometimes when we review legal documents, and this is kind of a legal document, we get so mired in the wording that we almost forget what we're trying to accomplish in the first place. So maybe the board can take a step back and say, is there language that the board would like to see in this ordinance that addresses that issue of how do you select a president in the first place? And we can certainly look at the practices by other agencies. I think I mentioned at a previous meeting that many other agencies, it's simply a vote. When it comes time to reorganize, they take nominations, they are given an opportunity to maybe make a speech, and then they vote amongst themselves as to who should be the president. Our ordinance does not touch on how do you select a president in the first place. It kind of skips over that and says, here's what the president's powers are. And it doesn't even mention the ascendancy of vice president to president, but that's then again, so this practice has kind of filled in the void, and now it's on a collision course with the ordinance. So that I just want to make sure that we're keeping in mind the bigger picture and not getting too mired in the language of some of the sections.
And I'm sorry, Director Hernandez, I know you have your hand up and you're eager to speak, but that was my point, General Manager Prum, is that this ordinance doesn't cover the two most important things that it needs to cover. How do we select a president, and I guess to a lesser extent a vice president, but why wouldn't we want to use this opportunity when we're reviewing and enhancing this ordinance? Why wouldn't we want to use this opportunity to do that?
No, I agree. Now's the opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and call on Director Hernandez.
This information is for the committee so that it has a little more background again on this very issue of trying to put 5 pounds of Jell-O in a 4-pound can. This has come up now every 3 or 4 years for the last 14. And I've found this out, and I didn't go any further back than that because it seems like it's a pattern. Unless we resolve this in the new ordinance, we're just going to keep coming back to the same problem. So I want the committee to take a look at how to eliminate the problem, not just to move it down the road another couple of years or 3, but how to eliminate the problem. And with that, I'll wait for the committee, and then we can have the full board discussion as to what to accomplish. Thank you.
Okay, President Ellerthorpe, would you like us to move on to the next item, and then maybe at the end we can kind of summarize and talk about next steps?
Well, you know what, I've got one more, not to muddy things any, but one more issue I'd like to have taken care of with relooking at this ordinance is the process of putting forth the new president putting forth a slate of committee members for all the various committees and agency representations, and how that's ratified by the board, because there's really nothing in the ordinance that says the board will ratify that, other than if there are 2 board members serving on more than one committee. That's the only time it says anything about board action. So I'd like that process to be clarified as well.
Yeah, and if I could tag onto that, President Ellerthorpe is right. If you read the ordinance literally, it says the president has the authority to appoint people to committees, appoint board members to the committees. The board president can form ad hoc committees and appoint people to those. And the only place that the board really has power, besides saying that the president serves at the discretion of the board, but the board has to be asked if, under certain circumstances, if 2 committee members are on the same 2 committee members are on more than one committee, or if the same individual director is a chair of more than one committee. Those need the unanimous approval of the board. Otherwise, it's the president makes a decision, appoints it, and you move on. Our practice has been, it's been more collegial, and the president would put forth, he would reach out beforehand, would put forth a slate of candidates. There'd be a discussion and we'd kind of take a soft vote. Is everybody good with that? But the ordinance is a little stricter than that. It doesn't require that. It doesn't preclude it, but it doesn't require it.
Thanks. I see Director Boyd Hudson's hand up.
Yeah, just a comment. Director Pinnock and I, we've had a lot of discussion about the things that are being raised in this meeting. I cordially invite all of you to attend the P3 meetings so that you can hear these discussions. They're riveting. We have a great time. So I would just like to remind you that while I appreciate your feedback, I would also like to remind folks that we have worked through some of these things already. I would appreciate a less directive tone and remind everyone that we're trying to do this for the good of the board. And we have had several discussions about some of the exact same things that are coming up. And we came to the conclusion that this was the best way to go about it without blowing it up. If it's the case that we want to blow it all up, because we thought, there are parts of this that have worked, and change is hard sometimes. So we were hoping to bring forward tweaks that we thought did satisfy some of the issues. And so I would appreciate if folks would just bear that in mind, and remember that our committee does not serve at y'all's all's pleasure. We're working to try to do this for the good of the board. Thank you.
I appreciate those comments. I've seen General Counsel Gilpin's hand up and down about 3 times. I'd like to hear from him. Sorry, Jim.
Well, I'm not ignoring the last comments, but there are some issues in here that have been identified over time that Director Hernandez alluded to, mostly in section 1.9C, because our appointments to the Water Authority Board, as you recall from the last meeting, are not aligned with what our ordinance says could be allowed. This came up before Director Pinnock and Boyd Hodgson were on the board previously. That Water Authority position is a 3-year term, I think, right, Craig?
6
And
years.
so they
6 years.
6 years, but their preference is we wouldn't be rotating who serves on the Water Authority Board every year. I mean, we can, because we're not bound by their ordinance, but this literally is written would allow everyone in their first term to have a shot at serving on that board. I think I don't think there's similar concerns with the Encina Wastewater Authority, but I think if we're going to clean this up, we could do some tweaks to the language. We had a debate over what it meant to have an opportunity to hold a position. Does that mean you have to actually hold the position, or do you have to have an opportunity for the board to elect you to the position? Just those kind of, as Glenn called them, legalese that get twisted on, at different times when the ordinance is implemented. So that's my only comment.
Yeah, and I would add that Mr. Gilpin brought up an issue that's going to be the committee's second recommendation that directly relates to section 1.9C.
Right.
So we'll get to that in a second. We can run that to ground as well.
Are we ready to have me go on to section 1.9C?
Yeah,
I
I think
am.
so, Chris.
Maybe you should go
Sorry
all the way
about
through and have questions for the questions for the end.
So that 1.9C, as General Counsel mentioned, and as some other board members mentioned, the recommendation from the committee was just to remove it, just take it out. And a good time to talk about that.
And that would give the president and or the board the full discretion as to who represents us at EWA and the County Water Authority.
Okay, any questions or comments on that? Director Sinella?
Yeah, I'm supportive of removing the language in this section. But I do think we need to get some more clarification as to, I think the President Eltharp's earlier point of how do we handle and how do we appoint to all of the committees and different agencies that we serve on. And so while I certainly am in favor of this recommendation for feedback for staff, I'd still like to see a little bit more clarity documented around the appointment process.
Okay, thank you.
Any other
Anyone
hands?
else? I don't see any.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
So section 2.3, I'm just going to kind of gloss over this one. This talks about reimbursement of expenses, and basically was pointed out that when the employee handbook is updated, it may change this ordinance. And so the committee's recommendation was to, deal with it when the handbook is updated. I don't think that causes much consternation for anybody.
It does.
Go ahead, Director Snow.
Thank you. It doesn't, but can you just tell us more about what timeline as to when the employee handbook is going to be updated, and then how does that impact board business?
Yeah, I would say it's probably going to be next fiscal year. We'll start reviewing the employee handbook. So starting in July, sometime after July 1, we'll start working on that. It doesn't have any direct immediate impact on the business of the board. There are some things we want to get a little bit more clarity on, and it's really all revolving around cost containment measures. Whether it's a board member, a manager, or a staff member traveling, we want to make sure we're getting the best value and keeping our costs as low as possible. So that's what some of the handbook language and ultimately the ordinance language change may be revolving around. The sooner a board member or a staff member can inform us of travel, the better airfare we get, the better rates we get at a hotel, the cheaper conference registration, all of that. So that's one of the, and this was not a committee driven thing. This was an issue that I brought up because we've been struggling with that and it's not just directed at board members, it's all the travel costs. We need to make sure we're controlling that to the maximum extent possible.
Yeah, and along those lines, General Manager Prohm, I have those same concerns and certainly try to take a fiscally responsible approach in everything that we do. Yeah, I see this as not this exercise that we're going through with this ordinance as an opportunity to really take a look at how we handle our travel and our conferences. Do we need to send 5 board members to the same conference, or can we get away with sending 2 and limit it to 2, and they come back and they educate the remainder of the board? I don't know what the answer is. I'm not necessarily advocating that we limit the participation in different conferences, but I think it's worthy of it's worthwhile conversation to have, and especially to explore the costs that are involved with travel and meals and conference fees and hotels and all that. So again, I think that there's this is the time and place to have that conversation, or we're going to be bringing back 216 again in 6 months from now.
Okay, I think that's all the hands, correct?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, so the next item is section 1.5, and this is specifically on the agenda, and I will slide over to actual ordinance 216 so you can actually see it. This one requires some further board level discussion, and it's unclear, nebulous in the ordinance right now. States that a board member can ask to have an item put on the agenda, and it's unclear whether that requires a second at this point. Any director may request an item to be placed on the agenda. Does it need a second to be placed on the agenda? And this is for the board to discuss.
All right, thanks, Chris. Director Sonoma.
Yeah, and my apologies for being so shy on this this issue or this item.
That's quite all right.
This is an important one because to me this this has kind of come up in recent times, not with necessarily with the board, but with the, at least one member of the public, who we need to have clear policies around what staff is going to focus their time on, especially in a time when we've been in a pandemic. I know we're coming out of it, but there's a lot of catch up now because priorities have shifted over the last 2 years, and now we need to get back on track to being, getting our infrastructure up to speed and everything. Not only do we need to identify how an item gets agendized by a board member, and in my opinion, I think there needs to be at least 2 board members for an item to be agendized. I don't think just one board member should be able to direct the general manager to put something on the on an agenda. But secondly, there was a comment made at a recent board meeting by a member of the public who said, we asked you to do something and you haven't done it yet, but the board never gave staff direction to do it. And and what they were asking for, it was 11 pages of questions and everything else, that it would have taken staff a tremendous amount of time and resources to be able to do that. And while I always think that we should do everything we can to address any questions that the public has, we also have to be mindful and provide some level of protection for our staff, that, to give them at least some sort of guidance from the majority of the board that, yes, these questions are something that really need to be answered, or give them some level of direction, answer them, but you don't have to type up a book. And so I don't know how we capture that into a policy, but I think we need to work on clarifying both those items.
Those comments are very on point, Director Snell. I couldn't agree more. Any other comments? Okay, Chris.
Okay. Next one is section 1.8B, standing advisory committees. Also requires further level board discussion. There's really no criteria for forming an ad hoc advisory committee. And then there's also the appointment of members of the public to an ad hoc committee, but the actual ordinance itself gives no instructions on that. And let me see if I can slide down to 1.8B. There it is. But if we're going to modify this, staff needs input from the board on how that should be done.
Yeah, and I would add that I think it is clear. The first sentence, the end of the first sentence of this section says by the president. So I think the committees are formed and staffed, or appointments made by the president. That's of the pulling members from the board. The last sentence talks about ad hoc committees may include members of the public, and those selections need to be made by the board, not the president. So there's a clear differentiation between appointing board members to an ad hoc committee and appointing members of the public to the committee. I don't know that to me, it's not that unclear, but if we need some more clarity on here in terms of what's the criteria for even forming an ad hoc committee in the first place, I don't know how to get clarity on something like that. Since I've been here, we've only formed one ad hoc committee. It's the Hillside Property Development Ad Hoc Committee. Pretty clear purpose, pretty clear end goal. It's going to take years, but it's clearly single purpose, like an ad hoc committee should be. It's hard to put those into writing as to what we may think a committee in the future may be. There are guidelines, and Council Gilpin can talk about what constitutes a purpose for an ad hoc committee. Maybe we can reiterate those here or reference the legal statutes for those, but beyond that, happy to get any feedback from the board.
Yeah, I guess oh, sorry, Director Snell, go ahead.
Yeah, I think if we do define how we're going to appoint committees in general, to me, an ad hoc advisory committee could be handled and appointed in the same way that all the other committees are. And I think that's a good practice, because you get the initial recommendation or the slate, if you will, from the president, but it needs still to be approved by the majority of the board. And if we don't, what I'm trying to avoid for future generations is that I'm trying to avoid situations where one board member is making decisions for the entire district. Because in this ordinance, if we do that, the only way that we can prevent the president from doing that is to remove the president, according to this ordinance. Because if, let's say, the majority of the board is for whatever reason, there's in the future, there's a controversial issue, and the majority of the board is not in favor of something that the president is trying to, a committee that the president is trying to appoint. But the president is insistent that they are going to appoint that committee anyways. It leaves that board no other choice but to remove the president. And I don't know if that's really where we want to be in the future. So that's what that's where my head is on all this stuff.
Director Hernandez.
Yeah, I think we should hear from our general counsel, because I don't know that it's ever happened in the past, but I was led to believe on any of the committee appointments, if a member of the board disagreed, he could move to change that selection. And then if a majority of the board agreed, it would get changed. But I would defer to general counsel as to if that's the case. So Jim, what do you think?
Well, thank you, Director Hernandez. I think there's a couple things I've observed. One, there's the way this is written. Two, is the way you've implemented in practice. Literally as written, this gives the president the authority to appoint. And if you don't like his or her appointments and they're unwilling to change those appointments, I think Director Snell is right. The only alternative is to remove the president from office. So that's one point. I obviously haven't ever gotten to that point here. The second thing is on the ad hocs. The ad hocs advisory committees are typically single subject committees that arise over time, and they're short in duration, they're special interest type committees. And, I've seen them come up from members of the board, not through the president. And, I haven't seen this happen here either, but literally the president could block somebody's ability to have an ad hoc committee study a specific issue. I don't think it had happened, but it seems you ought to want to incorporate some latitude for the board members to raise these ad hoc committees for suggestions for approval by the whole board.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, proceed.
And finally, we get to section 1.8C, and this requires some further level discussion as well. And specifically, the board approves committee meeting minutes when the board maybe weren't participants in committee meeting minutes. And the committee was wondering, well, should the committees approve their own minutes rather than bring them to the board for group approval when the entire group is essentially unfamiliar with what happened at the committee meeting? And this is 1.8C.
Yeah, and I would add two thoughts to that. One is that if you wanted the committee to approve their own minutes at their next committee meeting, sometimes that's a long delay. In the past, our committees tend to meet more frequently now, but in the past they met infrequently, and you could go 3, 6, maybe even 12 months before you have another committee meeting, and those minutes in the meantime just sit there. So that's the bad side of having the committee approve their own minutes. Chris mentioned that the downside of doing it at the board is that you have 3 out of the 5 board members voting to approve minutes that they didn't even attend the meeting at. So I'm looking at Mr. Gilpin's little rectangle here, and maybe he can help us. Maybe there's a way at a board meeting, when you approve the minutes, that the only people that are really voting on that are the committee members that were on the committee members for those minutes, but they're doing it at a board meeting, because obviously the board meetings are more frequent, twice a month as opposed to once every month or maybe every 6 months.
Well, I guess the other alternative, Glenn, is you could have them approved post-meeting. You and I discussed this some time ago. I mean, there are other processes, but I would say it is a little strange for the board to approve meeting minutes that, only 2 of the people were there and could acknowledge what happened. I have not seen a board do it where the committee meeting minutes come forward and only those committee people vote on it, because by definition, that's less than a majority. So, what's the point of the approval?
Yeah, I would just say that, the water authority does it this way, where the committee approves the last committee meeting minutes in their committee. But the difference there is that all the committee meetings are on the same day as the board, so you don't run into that issue of timing that the general manager addressed. So yeah, I think it's a little strange too, to approve something that you weren't present at, but I'll call on Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you. And I think in fairness to Director Pinnock and myself, this was brought in before, and I'm not sure that either he or I had thought about that, and we had sort of the same reaction. Oh yeah, that is a little bit strange. So I'm not sure that we have a strong opinion about the way this should go, but I will like to raise that, our committees are 2 people. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we appoint someone as a 3rd voting member? Because what if somebody says yes and somebody says no? Then what happens next? And that also, if staff becomes one of the members, that puts them in a very difficult position, because that means they're going to have to side with one director and against another director, which I think they're not going to thank us for very often.
You're correct.
So I just wanted to throw that out there too. I think that I think it's a great point that was brought up, and it is a little bit unusual. But maybe Director Pinnock has a different opinion, but I don't have a strong opinion either way about this. And I do want to bring up the possibility that it gets us in a little bit of a pickle, because we have an even number on every committee.
That's a good point. General Counsel Gilpin.
Well, yeah, I just want to point out for you, you have 2 members of a committee because you have to have less than a majority. So you can't have 3 people on the committee given your 5-person board. And that's, the nature of the committee is that the committee reviews things and then makes a recommendation to the board as to action, and the board acts on it. So we can't have 3 board members going to a committee meeting and deciding to take action. If a board member wants to attend a committee meeting, the Brown Act says all they can do is be an observer in the audience. So unless we go to some other structure where we have committees of the whole and structure it that way, we violate the Brown Act if we add a 3rd member on any of the discussion or approvals. So.
Right. I think I suggested staff rather than having another board member present, and the complications that would come from that. I think that would be difficult.
Director Sinella.
And just a point of clarification for legal counsel. Is this language the way it is today because we're required to approve the meeting minutes from the committee, or could we do something that's lesser than an approval, but maybe the committee reviewed for accuracy the minutes and are confirming that they are accurate?
Well, the board is not required to approve the committee minutes.
No, but the committee, that if you go to the language that's in place today, I think it said something along the lines that the committees, let me see here. Where is it? You
Yeah,
know what?
just,
I think we can leave it as is.
yeah, you're supposed to file them. It doesn't say for board approval.
So,
It's a notification notice.
are we required to approve them?
No, you can accept them as minutes of what occurred at the committee meeting. So you have, it's essentially a report, Director Sinella.
Okay.
That
Well,
sounds like an
I'm-
easy way to
I'm-
take care of it.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with not approving them. Just have the committee, ensure that they're accurate and filed.
Right.
Yeah, if, so that's the rub though, whether you, I think it's a little bit of semantics, whether they're approving him or just authenticating them, but we don't release the minutes to the public until there's been a process where somebody's blessed them. We have the board do that. So Ann's waiting to post minutes. She, meeting may have happened 3 months ago, but we just got it in front of the board to approve for whatever reason. And those minutes don't go out until the board approves them. So if it's not an official approval by the board, we have to have some other mechanism. Chris, can you bring up section 1.6B? Do you have it in here? And I don't know if this is helpful, but it says the board president or other person who may preside at the meeting or the secretary, that's me, shall authenticate the minutes, ordinances, and resolutions after these have been transcribed into the appropriate books. And when so authenticated, they shall constitute the official minutes. I'm not suggesting that the board delegate that authority to me, but if we're an impasse, that's a role that I could maybe help. And maybe it's a hybrid with what Director Boyd Hodgson recommended, that in my capacity as secretary, I participate with the board for authentication of minutes.
GM Prum, could I maybe just suggest that I consult with you and we come up with a process to handle them, to address your concerns and deal with the approval thing?
I get the sense this is going back to the committee anyway, so we can, you and I can talk and we can inform the committee when we get back together.
Sounds like a plan. Director Hernandez.
Yeah, I would agree with Director Sinella. The way the ordinance is presently written, the filing the minutes should be enough. If at the board member, at the board meeting, if when the report is given, if something is not done correctly, the other committee member can say, no, it really didn't happen that way. Or don't you remember it happened this way? So I would leave that particular section alone and move on.
Thank you. I think we have a plan for the general manager and general counsel to get together and come up with a process. We'll wait to see what they come up with.
And
Okay.
that concludes the items that were brought forward by the committee.
Thanks, Chris. I don't know what took you so long, but thank you. Okay, is there enough direction, comment,
Yeah.
feedback?
I'm going to say no. I don't want to rehash the whole meeting, but for example, I didn't get a simple answer to how do we select a president. So maybe the committee members do. So maybe this goes back to committee and we can talk about developing alternative language for board's consideration in the future. But it's clear there's a little bit more work that needs to be done before the board's comfortable with the recommended changes.
Well, one comment on that. I mean, I've got enough information. It was good. It was good feedback. On this last one, though, I just changed the word from approve to authenticate, and you're fine. As far as the presidency, I think, isn't there a rotation based on districts? Wasn't there isn't there a rotation currently in place? I don't know whether it's practice or policy on districts.
So-
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, so there's a practice, there's a rotation, and it's listed by name, but you can assign the names to their divisions, and that's kind of what we've historically gone with. And based on the election cycles and whether people were reelected or not, it's been a while since we've had this conflict with the rotational practice and the ordinance as written. So yeah, but it is just a practice, Director Pennick. We've looked at that sheet, and that every December when I bring that forward, I show you what's been done the last 10 years for the rotation. And I try to clarify that it's not obligated to follow the practice, but for your information, this is the rotation.
And it only comes into collision course when there's a vice president that's supposed to step in and we got to override that. My understanding.
Or you run out of time and you have two new board members and only 1 year remaining, for example. And we haven't gotten there yet, but we're at the point where there's 2 new board members and only 2 years remaining. So by the ordinance, our hands are tied, and that conflicts with the ascendancy of the current vice president to the president's office.
Exactly my point. Yeah, but I think in the rotation, it works fine if we didn't factor in the vice presidency. My understanding, but we had I've got enough direction to go back to P3 and discuss with in the capable hands of Director Boyd Hodgins.
No pressure.
I have the utmost confidence in the committee.
We'll get it done.
Director.
Or not. We'll bring it
Director-
forward again.
Okay, Director
I do have a
Hernandez,
clarification. Sorry, one quick clarification.
go ahead.
I don't think we want to blow this. I mean, I know Director Sinella said this is blow it up and write it some new stuff. I don't know if we want to do that because it's most is written pretty well. I mean, again, to use Director Boyd Hodgins' comments, I mean, a tweak is fine for me. So I think tweaking, and I would like direction from the board. Do you want us to blow it out of the water or do you want us to tweak?
Let's hear from Director Hernandez.
My opinion is tweaking is what needs to be done. However, whatever is done, I would like to see that we don't have to keep running into this every 3 or 4 years because of the 5 pounds of Jell-O going into a 4-pound can. So whatever needs to be done, let's get it done this time and put this behind us.
Okay, thank you. Director Sinella.
Yeah, and again, I just want to reiterate that the most sincerest, deepest appreciation for the committee's efforts. This whole ordinance is how it is the policy that governs the organization of the board. However, it doesn't even explain how we elect a president. It doesn't currently explain how we elect a vice president, although the proposed changes do offer one way to do that. I'm not 100% agreement with sole power of the president to do that, but that's a conversation that we can have. And it also doesn't outline how we select our committees and how they're approved. And so I don't see how we can not address those items. And maybe the word blow up is the wrong term, but as long as we tweak it to include new language that addresses those 3 items that are paramount, I wouldn't be comfortable with going forward at this point.
I agree with that. I think it sounds like the issues are more than just little tweaks. I think we need to address them.
Yeah, if I may add on that last issue that Director Sinella brought up, I think the ordinance is clear on the formation and appointment of directors to committees. If the board doesn't like the way it's stated, that's a different issue. We can change it, but I don't think there's a inherent lack of clarity on the process that's supposed to be followed. Whether we followed it or not that's a separate conversation, but I believe the ordinance is clear. If that's not what the board wants it to say, then let's change it. But I don't think there's much ambiguity in that aspect. I agree with the president, vice president comments.
Right. Okay, now do you have enough feedback?
Closer, yeah. Yeah, I think we're good. I think we're good to get the band back
Okay.
together and
Yeah, I think with a proposed ordinance coming back, I think we'll have more discussion and, possibly more to change. I
Yeah.
don't know.
some of it might be just our philosophies. I'm more of a guidelines with flexibility. And sometimes there's a letter of the law, sometimes there's a spirit of the law. And if we have some good guidelines with some flexibility, to me, that works. Flexibility. And again, I like to use the word flexibility instead of power. Or we can write, every letter of the law, and then that can get real wordy. It can get really into semantics. And if we're just going, we have to do this, we have to elect this division for this president in this year, and that one, it'll never work. Two, that's what I'm trying to get feedback from you guys, is from you board members, sorry, is do we want letter of the law? Do we want everything written down? Do we want, do we want some rigidity there? Or do we want some guidelines with flexibility, understanding that, nobody really has power, that can all be done. That's what a board meeting's for. We can discuss it. And when there's rigidity, the discussion's out the window. We've got to follow the actual policy when we write it into the policy. So I don't know if these are policies, are these guidelines, do we want it to be rigid? So that's the feedback I'm looking from the board members to see which way, and I can go either way, but my philosophy is, again, more flexibility with some guidelines, but I'm serving on the board and in the public. And so it's whatever the public and or board members, how they want us to proceed.
Okay, thank you. Director Hernandez.
Yes, I'm very comfortable with the competence of the committee to do what's necessary to bring it back. But I did want it, my ears perked up when General Counsel Gilpin said that if there was something, and I think it was relative to the committee appointments, if there was something that the board or a member of the board disagreed with, he couldn't bring it up to change with the majority of the board, as opposed to the only way to get around it was to throw the president under the bus. Is that absolute, Jim?
Well, I should clarify, Director Hernandez, that's the way the policy is written. But as I've told you on numerous these discussions, if something comes up and you don't like the current policy, three of you can always change the policy at that minute. So, but practically speaking, yeah, you're not going to, you guys have, you all have handled it in the past. You know, if you don't like something, you raise it and you vote. But technically, this just gives the president the authority to appoint.
Yeah,
it shouldn't even come to you for action. He would just report. He or she would just report their appointments.
I trust the committee.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments? Seeing none, I think we have direction. Thanks, Chris. Okay, moving on to 2.4.
Yeah, I'll take that.
California Special Districts Association, CSDA Board of Directors call for nominations, seat B.
Yeah, I think we can make this one pretty quick. They have an open seat that will be coming open on seat B for CSDA, the Southern Network, and they're looking for nominations. This is nominations only at this point in time. To be eligible, you have to be affiliated with an independent special district in good standing, which we are, located within the geographical network, which we are, and you have to be a board member or a managerial employee. I'll talk a little bit about the expectations for anybody who might be interested. They want you to attend all the board meetings, and that's 4 to 5 per year in Sacramento. Participate on at least one committee, and they meet 3 to 5 times per year in Sacramento. I don't know their COVID status, but you have to assume you're ultimately going to be going up to Sacramento. They want you to attend the CSDA Special Legislative Days and the CSDA Annual Conference, complete all 4 modules of the CSDA Special District Leadership Academy within 2 years of being elected, and they want you to help complete the annual CEO evaluation. We get to nominate 1 member, so and it would require a resolution of support, a candidate information sheet, along with a nomination form. Nominations are due March 31st. And when CSDA gets these, they'll look at all these nominations and they'll put a committee together and they'll form a slate of candidates. So just because you submit a nomination doesn't mean you're going to be on the ultimate slate. The slate that they put out there will be put out for electronic voting starting June 2nd through July 8th. And then if a board member is selected, they'll be introduced at the annual conference in Palm Desert in August. There is an incumbent running. So Don Bartz from the Phelan Pinion Hills Community Services District is rerunning for election, just so you know. If any of our directors is interested in being considered, we will come back, staff will come back with a resolution of support at our next meeting on March 16th and work with the selected director to complete the nomination packet. So with that, we're just looking for any input as to whether any directors are interested in being considered.
Okay, any interest from anybody?
Have we had any representation from our district before?
I don't remember the last time we were represented at CSDA.
I don't recall in the last
Yeah.
6-7 years.
It's been a
I
long
don't
time.
recall in the last 11.
Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you. This sounds like it's right up Director Hernandez's alley. Is that something that you would like to do?
No, thank you, my dear. I am, I'm feeling quite
Okay.
comfortable.
Good.
Okay.
Would it benefit the district at all? I mean, what benefit to the district is it to sit on that seat?
You know, there's the potential for a benefit. You get to shape policy when you're on the board, just like being a board member, you get to shape policy and shape the direction of the organization you're on. They represent our industry. So any benefits we would get would probably be more indirect than direct, right? It may be a policy that favors all special districts and, you know, rising tide floats all boats. You're not going to be able to write a policy that gives Vallecitos preferential treatment over any other special district. So, but yeah, I think there could be some indirect benefits and would help the industry as a whole.
And the costs or the travel costs and stuff for that, or that of the board, the district?
Yeah, all the costs are our responsibility. And I should have said, there's no obligation. If we don't respond to them by the March 31st deadline, they just assemble all the nominations they did receive. So if I don't hear anything from the board, then we'll just move on. If I do, then we'll come back on March 16th.
All right, I guess we'll move on then. I think that concludes our action items. And so let's go to reports.
Yeah,
and
I've
the
got
general.
sorry, President Eltharp. I've got quite a few and I'll try to make them fast. So staff is finalizing the interactive maps for the redistricting effort that was discussed at our last board meeting. We're going to be coming up with a kind of a base interactive map as well as interactive maps for the two options, and those should be available next week. And I believe it'll be agendized again for the March 16th meeting. So they'll be available for the public and the board well before the next board meeting. Staff has opened up the recently approved scholarship program for interested students. You may recall the board approved the scholarship program. So the closing date is April 29th. And then when that date closes, we will work with the policy committee to select students from the list of applications. Just an update on the water arrearages program. So those refunds are in the process of being refunded. We're notifying the customers of what to expect. They will be in the upcoming billing cycle, and the total amount that will be credited to eligible customers is $229,000 and change. So it was a little less than the amount that we told the board before, but that's because some of the customers have come forward in the meantime and paid off their bills. So they no longer have an outstanding balance. And in conjunction with that, we're working on preparing our submittal for the wastewater arrearages program, which is kind of an identical, kind of parallel process to the water arrearages program. We don't have our numbers for how much we'll be seeking for that, but it's a very similar process. Just an update on South Lake. Staff did meet with the City of San Marcos staff earlier this week to work out some of the last remaining details on the South Lake agreement, which would allow residents and our customers access to a recreational trail around South Lake. And we're hopeful that the agreement will come before the board sometime before or right around the end of the fiscal year. Just a reminder that the Water Authority did start their Pipeline 4 shutdown to repair the damaged pipeline there. They started the shutdown on Monday night. Our staff has been monitoring the reservoir levels, serving that affected area closely, and we're extremely confident that there won't be any water supply problems during the anticipated 10-day shutdown. The city of San Marcos recently issued a proclamation for Fix a Leak Week, and that supports the Environmental Protection Agency's Water Sense program. And that Fix a Leak Week is March 14th through the 20th in San Marcos. And the city did provide us with a copy of a proclamation, and I think Chris picked up a copy of it today. So we'll probably display it in the boardroom next time we go live. And that's all I have to report today, President Althorp.
Thank you. Director Hernandez, you have a question?
Could you remind me on the scholarship, whether the application includes some kind of essay or how's that going to be determined?
And Chris is still here. He can, no, Chris isn't still here, but basically they have to submit something, kind of an essay, tell them how they're going to use the money, kind of a financial analysis. How do you plan to spend the money? What are you going to do with what field are you going to get into? So there will be information for the board member or the committee members and staff to go through to try to sift through and figure out who's the best candidate. So as a reminder, there were 6 $1,000 scholarships. 4 were for high school seniors and 2 were for students already in a local college. So not a lot of requirements other than those. So.
All right, thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Okay, moving on to District Legal Counsel.
Thank you, President Elthorp. Just a couple of items. One is just a reminder on your Form 700 deadline, April 1st. So I know they're working with you on those. The second is there's a proposed Proposition 218 initiative that has just been cleared for circulation. The Attorney General's title for it is Limits Ability of Voters and State and Local Governments to Raise Revenue for Government Services. If it gets the signatures, it would go forward, and if approved, it would impose new restrictions on ability of agencies such as Vallecitos to raise revenue, fees, or taxes under the Proposition 218 process. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is San Diego County Water Authority. The board had its formal meeting last week, February 24th. A whole bunch of board actions, but they were all pretty routine contract approvals, such as professional services contracts, O&M service contracts, and approval of construction contract change orders. There was one notable contract, and I'll read it. The board authorized the general manager to award a professional services contract with Black & Veatch Corporation to provide planning services to prepare the 2023 water facilities master plan for a 30-month period in an amount not to exceed $2.85 million. So that kind of raised my eyebrow a bit, but it's a long process. So it's, they're looking at a 30-month process. So it's a pretty expensive contract. But other than that, pretty much everything else was routine. So we'll move on to Encina Wastewater Authority.
Yes, we had our board meeting on the 23rd. There were 3 action items. One was the standard AB 361. So we are going to maintain virtual meetings for at least another month. The second one was the CalPERS update status. We're much like Vallecitos and Encina had decided over the 3-year to split the amount in thirds, and this is the last payment we're going to make. They went through a update relative to where PERS is at and what their new percentage is going to be. I'm shocked that still they're not got anywhere near, except for 1 year in the last 8 or 10, close to their percentage. But we'll keep an eye on that. And then the last one was the final acceptance and approval of the effluent equalization facility, which was approved by the board. And that's the report. I don't know if anything else, Mike?
No, you hit it. The only thing I would just add, just for a little bit of color around the pension liability. I mean, this shouldn't come to a surprise to anybody who's got a 401k or anything like that. The CalPERS pension system had an incredible year last year. I think they made 20%,
Yeah.
roughly 20% returns, which is historically unprecedented. Unfortunately, in the first Q1 of this year, they've given back probably half or more of it. So and so we'll see. This pension liability for both Encina, well, not just Encina and Vallecitos, but for any organization that is involved with CalPERS, is I think what we're going to see is we're going to be chasing that liability forever, and that while both agencies, Vallecitos and Encina, did the right thing by coming up with 3-year plans to close that gap. Closing that gap, that gap is very much alive. That gap's not going away. So this is not a done deal for either of us. So so stay tuned and hold on to your wallets.
Yeah, I think we might need to relook at how we approach that. I've always thought maybe each year we pay a percentage of the current liability or something like that, rather than to set some kind of finite year limit. So,
yeah, and this is not unique to Encina or Vallecitos. This is every single city, any organization or agency that's involved with CalPERS.
all right, thank you. Moving on to standing committees. Any standing committees?
None that I chair.
Okay. Next is director's reports on meetings, conferences, and seminars attended.
Oh, I'm sorry, Director or President Elitharp. I didn't realize the ad hoc committee was standing, but let me report on that. We had our ad hoc committee on Wednesday, the 23rd. Director Sinella, myself, Manager Pruitt, and our consultant Rick Giddings. We discussed there's going to be 2 paths that potentially we could take. We could work with developers to entitle and develop the property, or we could obtain services of experts to assist the district in the entitlement process. We have had 4 submittals from developers to help us, and we've had several engineering and environmental firms that have submitted proposals. The committee will be conducting interviews with all of those individual firms to determine which is, we think, the committee is the better path to take. Once that is accomplished, we will bring that recommendation back with findings to the board to have a full discussion and see if you will take our recommendations. And that's the report up and to date. The interviews are going to be later this month, and we should have them all completed this month.
Thank you. Look forward to the future agenda item. Director Boyd Hodgson.
Thank you. I have a question. If when you're interviewing the folks that are coming before you, is there ever opportunity to ask them what their plans are in their development plans to conserve water? It seems like we have an opportunity to ask that question and see if, since we're a water agency, asking, do you have an idea, or do you have a way to, can you give us some assurances that if you put down any surfaces, they'll be pervious so that we can try to capture stormwater, or just, something that helps conserve water. It seems like we have sort of a unique opportunity to make those demands with this particular item, whereas, we don't have that opportunity elsewhere because we're not interacting so closely with developers. But it seems like we have such a great opportunity. So I'm just wondering if there's opportunity there.
Oh, absolutely. This is an opportunity for the district to really fly some banners on a development project, that being one of them. Also, what's their plan going to include? Affordable housing, senior housing, veteran housing, market housing. But again, in my opinion, my ultimate goal is that development has had in the past pretty nasty tastes in a lot of people's mouth in our community. I want this one to be wholeheartedly embraced, and for the Vallecitos Water District to be able to shout it from the rooftops of what a great job we have done to provide much needed housing in our community. Mike is on the committee. Do you have anything to add to that, Mike?
No, I think Director Boyd Hodgson brings up a great point, and I absolutely do think we will have the opportunity. We have not had the opportunity yet because we haven't met with anybody or conducted any interviews, but we will soon. And for common grounds and stuff and such, I think having requirements, for a lack of a better way to put it, to have drought tolerant plants and landscaping and that kind of stuff, I think is perfectly reasonable. We would hope that this would be a showcase for the community to come and look at, to get ideas of what can be done. I know there's a lot of regulation for builders around the capturing stormwater, so I think that'll be covered just through regulation anyways. But I mean solar, and not just water, but I mean this could be a neighborhood of the future to a certain extent.
And let me offer to the rest of the board, if you have questions that are burning in your heart as to what you would like us to ask, I'm sure Director Sinella and I would be happy to carry those to the interview.
President Elthorpe, I don't know if you see it, but there's a hand from Ms. Martin up.
Okay. Can we let her speak, General Manager?
I think so. She'll obviously be limited on what we can engage in, but I don't recognize when, I don't remember when her hand was raised, but would you like me to open up her mic?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Ms. Martin.
Yes, can you hear me, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to inquire, please, what is the name of this ad hoc committee and when does it meet?
So it's if President Elthorpe, if you're okay, I could try to answer it. It's
Sure.
called the Hillside Property Development Ad Hoc Committee. They're an ad hoc committee, so they don't have regular standing meeting times. And they're not.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
It sounds like this isn't something where the public can attend.
They don't have the same noticing requirements. Maybe Council Gilpin can address the ad hoc committee requirements.
Yeah, they're not open public meetings under the Brown Act. It's an ad hoc meeting. On a
Okay.
limited item. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much for clarifying that. And I do want to thank all of you and all of the staff for the way in which you are openly conducting your discussions about policy and how things are progressing. I, for one, greatly appreciate it, and I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Okay. I think we can move on to director's reports on meetings, conferences, seminars attended. Anything to report?
I think I'm up to date on the conferences, but I did want to let the board know that I attended the city council meeting, the last meeting, I think it was last Tuesday, with Director Pinnick, and the district received a proclamation from the mayor for our partnership with the city to install bottle refilling hydration stations at 5 of our parks. And these hydration stations include not just the feature to fill our bottles, but also at the bottom there's like a dog bowl for the dogs to be able to get water as well. And it gave a short speech at the council meeting, and seemed like, just looking at the audience and reading body language and smiles and applause, that everybody was really appreciative of the partnership between Vallecitos and the city to get that done.
That's great. That's a great project. I appreciate your attendance. Okay, anything else? Any other meetings? Okay, seeing none. other business. Quarterly board expenses are included in the package for information only. And next is director's comments and future agenda items. Any comments? Seeing none, we're at the point of adjournment. So appreciate everybody's attendance, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Good night,
Thanks.
everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night, everyone.